I mean, come on, 4 shots on net in the first couple of periods last night. Whether they have like 3 or 4 on net, every period they played against what they did not like they were trying offensively at all. There was zero effort offensively to do anything. Like they were keeping the games respectable, playing good defense. Swayman played well, but they were not playing to win either one of those games, in my opinion. So I think they got what they wanted. They're going to get a team that I think they've dominated all year, and it's going to be a good matchup for them. Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. All of my Bruins and NHL writings, you get premium membership. You get to read all of them sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns for the Boston Sports Journal. Check bostonsportsjournal.com for all of that stuff. Pucks with Haggs podcast is powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 82nd episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I have friend and colleague Mick Colageo here with me today. This will be a big episode. We'll get to talk about the Bruins, the playoffs, who they're going to play. We know all that stuff now. Let's quickly, though, thank our sponsor, Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America with the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. For example, David Pastrnak, you can pick shots on net. You could pick goals. You could probably pick giveaways. He had an awful one last night in the middle of the ice that turned into an empty net goal for the Ottawa Senators. He's always good for a few giveaways in addition to all the offense he provides. Charlie McAvoy picked block shots, hits, all kinds of stuff. Quick aside, if you picked Jeremy Lauzon with the hits down in Nashville, you were rolling in the money this year because he set the NHL record with the newfangled way they keep track of the hits statistic. Most hits in a season in the NHL ever. Jeremy Lauzon, an old friend that was drafted by the Boston Bruins. But anyway, another player that you can get involved in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, Mick. First, before we get into it, please plug away where everybody can find your work.
Okay. Rank Wrap, my blog. I link to it on X and on Facebook. My Sunday column on BostonHockeyNow.com and seasonal issues of the Hockey News. I write the little Bruins part when they come out with those things like prospects, yearbook, money power. And I do podcasts like this.
That's right. And we're always glad to have Mick. Let's get into it, Mick. Bruins lose 3-1 to the Ottawa Senators last night. Really 5 periods of lackluster hockey going back to the previous game against Washington and the first 2 periods against Ottawa, just barely even getting shots on net. They finally sort of turned it on and woke up in the third period. Put 23 shots on Anton Forsberg, could only get 1 by him. Ended up losing 3-1 on an empty net goal at the end. Your thoughts on the way the season ended, and obviously now with the way things ended, they lost out on the Atlantic Division to the Florida Panthers, who beat the Maple Leafs last night. The Florida Panthers will face the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. The Bruins will host the Toronto Maple Leafs. I would assume it's going to be Saturday night at 8:00, hockey night in Canada for Game 1. Your thoughts on what we've seen over the last few days and the playoff opponent?
If I had a pillow on me, I'd give you an illustration because I want to put my head under it. I hate the way the Bruins finished this season. It does not inspire hope that they're going to play well and turn on, find that switch. Somebody located for the third period. That's great that they found it, but I just don't. I think they're playing with fire to peter out the way they did. They talked it down when they started. I don't want to say they mailed in games, but I don't think I've ever seen a team have this good a season, numbers wise, standings wise, and be so completely dependent on a certain high threshold of compete that makes the difference between being able to lose to anyone and being able to beat anyone. but that's them. So if the theory holds true that that's going to come naturally to them when the puck drops Saturday, then maybe I should, get my head out from underneath that pillow. But it's not inspiring what happened this past week. It just isn't.
No, I mean, it's never inspiring to watch a team mail in games, Mick, but we've seen this before at the end of regular seasons, especially with teams where most things are clinched or they're sort of jockeying for position in the playoffs, when things really sort of come into focus as to who you're going to play. I'm going to tell you right now, and I had people around the league asking me this last night, I think the Bruins didn't want to play the Lightning. I think they wanted to play the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think they wanted the Florida Panthers to win the division. I think they played the last two games like they didn't want to win them. And it's a terrible thing to do. It's a terrible thing to, lose on purpose. And I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't be that strong about it. But I don't think the motivation was there for them to go balls out and win these games certainly against a Washington team that was fighting for their playoff lives. And then against an Ottawa team that, had some pride and wanted to close out the season. And obviously, Forsberg played unbelievable last night in net for the Senators, too. The Bruins could have and should have probably tied up that game and won it in the third period. He made a bunch of great saves at that point when they finally woke up. But I think they look like a team that really didn't want to win these games, that wanted to finish second, that wanted to play a team in the Toronto Maple Leafs that they've beaten in 6 straight playoff series, beaten a bunch of players who are not playoff hardened players, even after all these years, are not the elite players they are during the regular season in the playoffs. A team that does have shaky goaltending, a team whose defense is not great. I think it's a much better matchup for them in the first round, the Toronto Maple Leafs, than the Tampa Bay Lightning would have. I think just the experience, the cups, the superstar players that show up when it's money time in the playoffs that the Lightning have. Andrei Vasilevsky is the ultimate stopper at the end of it. Him versus the goaltending that the Toronto Maple Leafs have. I think Tampa Bay is a much more formidable playoff opponent when it gets to, when stuff gets real in the postseason than the Toronto Maple Leafs are. And I think that's why the Bruins played the way they did the last couple of games. They showed me everything I needed to see when they won 5 out of 6, when they, played a bunch of playoff teams, beat them, played really, really well, played shutdown defense, scored goals, did all the things they had to do. Played some of their best hockey of the season, their best sort of two-way complete 60-minute hockey of the season in those games. I really throw out what we saw in the last 2 games out the window. I've seen too many irrelevant late season, regular season games with teams that are going to the playoffs to really get worried about it. I don't think Jim Montgomery, especially after the Washington game, he just was like, that's a mulligan, and kind of threw it out. Like he spoke the truth that they weren't at the level the Capitals were, but he did not seem worked up about it in any way, shape, or form. I think last night it was more the same. I don't think he was, I think he was more focused on the playoffs and thinking about that last night, and seemed to be more in playoff mode and looking ahead to that than worried about what had just happened on the ice. So that's my thoughts on the way the season ended. I think on some level, whether it was psychologically, whether it was in the back of their minds, I don't think they really felt like they needed those games. I think they felt like they would be better off playing Toronto in the first round. Maybe it's be careful what you ask for. Like, who knows if, the hockey gods and karma will come back to bite them for sort of, maybe maneuvering things at the end like they did. But I just looked, I mean, come on, 4 shots on net in the first couple of periods last night, whether they have like 3 or 4 on net, every period they played against what they did not like they were trying offensively at all. There was zero effort offensively to do anything. Like, they were keeping the games respectable, playing good defense. Swayman played well, but they were not playing to win either one of those games, in my opinion. So I think they got what they wanted. They're going to get a team that I think they've dominated all year and is going to be a good matchup for them.
Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so easy to play. I can make my Celtic picks and make my entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals and easy gameplay and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. Celtics and NBA fans, you can get in on Prize Picks in 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. On Prize Picks this week, I'm selecting Jason Tatum to dish out more than 5 assists and his teammate Jaylen Brown to have more than 22.5 points. Download the app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Prize Picks.
I have a hard time, as plausible as it sounds theoretically, and the part you didn't really touch on is that when they do have to get Florida or Tampa in the second round, that's going to be after those two teams have an intrastate war.
Correct.
So they might get a compromised version of one of those teams. So to pile on to your plausible theory, that said, tacking the question from a separate prism here, I have a hard time believing that the game of hockey at this level can be negotiated that way. I think that if you couldn't get motivated to find that pitch level that the Bruins seem so dependent on all year to play at a level that makes them viable against good competition, then that I can understand. The idea that, I really don't want to play them, so that saps motivation. I just think that they still had first. What a season not to have Bergeron and Krejci or their deadline pickups, and come back with this team, accomplish what they did, and get to this point, have a chance to win the division. It seems antithetical to me that they wouldn't have all the motivation that they needed to go out and get that. And it bothers me that they didn't. So you got to play one of these teams in the second round if you don't play them in the first. So I have a hard time engaging the process of that thought from an angle of what they did as a team and what they say all year long and what they care about goes on inside that one room. And that's what they care about. They don't worry about what's on the outside unless they've been telling us a big fat lie. And I'm just not inclined to think that was part of this equation. I just think that they didn't find that compete level. And it bothers me that
but that's what I'm saying too, Mick. But there's a reason they didn't find that compete level.
I don't think it had to do with
because I don't think they were really motivated to go out and show that compete level. Like they were not nearly as motivated as either one of those teams those last two games, and it was obvious watching those games that the engagement level, the emotional level, the effort level, all of that stuff was not there like it was for those other two teams they were playing against, and I think there's a reason for that.
Well, I think that the better teams have brought out better versions of the Bruins because of the task and the urgency, but that's been their personality as a team all year long. That if they need the game, if they need to perform well, they summon it. If they don't, boy, it's really hard to get them to get up, make their bed, and go to work. Yep.
But I think that bodes well in some respects for the playoffs because I think they will be up for all of these games. And to your point, I think that is the best sort of pathway they could craft for themselves. They have the best case scenario right now in the playoffs that they could have had. Playing Toronto in the first round, as you said, the two Florida teams beat each other up in the first round in the other series in Florida. And then you end up, if you can advance past Toronto for the seventh straight time in a playoff series, the Toronto Maple Leafs have not beaten the Bruins in a playoff series since 1959. Were you even on this planet in 1959, Mick?
Yes, I was, but I had not yet been to my first Bruins game.
There you go. So at least
that would not happen for another 9 years.
At least Mick was alive for that one. He doesn't remember it, but he was on this planet. He was on this mortal coil. So I think like this worked out as well as it could have. Does it mean that we're going to win the cup? No. Does it mean they're going to get to the conference finals? No. And I said this to you before we started the show. I think what it means selfishly from our perspective as reporters and as people covering the team is that we'll get at least a month out of this team in the playoffs, which would be awesome. I
am not signing up to that theory. Okay.
I don't like.
I think they're the other piece of they're the X factor though, and I don't like how they're coming to it.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but like I said, I've been doing this too long. I've covered too many regular seasons. I've seen too many times when teams look like hot garbage at the end of the season, and then as soon as the playoffs start, it's a totally different thing. Especially with a team that, like I said, the previous 6 or 7 games before those last two, they looked so good that I really am not worried about it. I think they showed everything they needed to show, and showed Jim Montgomery, frankly, after he told him to wake the F up in a practice, showed the coaching staff and him
It took
what
that
they
though.
needed, what they
It
needed to
took,
see.
it took that though. You know, it's like
It,
they
it
were,
does. It
how long
did.
would that have
But
gone
but
on?
but
I don't
Mick,
know.
it's going to take things like that. Like for most teams, I think it takes that. I think when you remove Patrice Bergeron and Zdeno Chara from the equation, I think maybe it's going to take stuff like that sometimes from somebody else in order to get that out of them. I do. And I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're also seeing a young team that, a lot of these guys, I think, we're having a harder time understanding how much they needed to raise the level of what they were doing, the intensity of what they were doing, the physicality of what they were doing to meet the playoff standard. And I think they started to finally figure it out at that point. And that's good coaching. Like, I think that,
It would be a great interview right now off the record? Pat Maroon.
yeah,
I would love to sit with him right now off the record and hear exactly what he thinks since he's gotten here.
yeah, yeah. I know that would be
Especially
interesting.
considering where he's been.
But he's not going to get the full complete picture until the playoffs start either, of what these guys are made out of, what the room is like all that stuff. Like when the real playoff bullets start whizzing around, I think that's when you'll see the true colors of everybody, and he'll be able to get a real better sort of understanding and evaluation of what's going on. But that will be interesting if you could get what he thinks of this room as opposed to other rooms. But I think this room is figuring it out. That's my feeling. I think those players are learning. I think some of those players that needed to sort of step into the void with all those other players retiring, the playoff warriors, the guys that have been doing it for a long time, a lot of these other players are going to have to step up and be those people now. And I think they're figuring it out. I think we're starting to see that some of them are stepping into that. And this will be their real opportunity now, playing the Leafs.
Oh,
Because
it's a huge opportunity for the younger core of this team to announce itself.
It is. There's no question. This is it. And I think, and like I said, that doesn't mean they have to win the cup to do that. I think winning a round, playing a couple of rounds, maybe even getting to the conference finals this year, making a step, a tangible step in the playoffs from last year is good enough. Like, I know everybody wants to win the cup, and I know fans are going to be all in for the cup, especially after a really good regular season. But making a step forward from where they were last year, especially with this new cast of characters, and with the summer where they're going to really be able to build and augment this roster and add to it, I think that's what you need to see. And I think that's what they have to do. And that's sort of the task or the mission at hand. And if they get rolling and they get through the first 2 rounds because it was advantageous for them, and they get some momentum, then all the more power to them,
I still feel that way about the team in general, even if they don't do well in this series and go out in 5 games or so. I mean, if that happened, I'd be disappointed, and I'd feel like they need to address the whole urgency issue.
Well, I think if they lose in 5 games, Mick, and if they lose in the first round again, I think Jim Montgomery might have to answer some questions, especially after a disappointment in the playoffs last year. If it's another sort of disappointing performance in the playoffs this year, I think there's going to be some hard questions there.
Well, especially considering that Don Sweeney hired him under duress.
Yeah,
I mean, he didn't think he was going to be going for a new coach.
Yep. So Toronto has lost 6, as we said, lost 6 straight playoff series to the Bruins, have not beaten the Bruins in a playoff series since 1959. This regular season, the Bruins were 4-0 against the Maple Leafs, outscored them 14-7. 949 save percentage for the Bruins in those games, and 891 save percentage in those games from the Maple Leafs. Pasternak had 7 points in 4 games against the Leafs. He continues to dominate them whenever he plays them. His numbers career-wise are excellent against the Maple Leafs. Zacha had 3 goals in the 4 games. DeBrusk had 6 points in the 4 games. He also traditionally plays pretty well against the Maple Leafs as a good Canadian boy that wants to do well on Hockey Night in Canada. Swayman in the 4-game series against the Leafs this year, 3-0, 1.59 goals against, 959 save percentage. And I thought he was excellent the other night against Washington. He was the best player on the ice for the Bruins and kept them in that game where they could have lost that game 4-0, 5-0. When you look at the numbers, when you look at the games they played against each other this year, when you look at where these teams are trending and what they've done in the playoffs recently, I just think, some people are going to say the Maple Leafs are due. The Bruins, this is a scary series. The Bruins might be the team that finally gets knocked off if the Maple Leafs figure it out and they can go on a run in the playoffs. Maybe this is the year Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and Nylander, Big Willie style, and all those guys, the core four in Toronto, sort of put it together and answer some of those playoff questions. I don't see it. I think this is going to be like, it may end up being a 6-game series. It may get extended a little bit. I think the Bruins are the better team. I think they're the better team equipped for the playoffs. Certainly they're the better team when you look at the really important parts of the playoffs, like goaltending, defense. Yes, their special teams have struggled a little bit lately. Yes, defensively, maybe they're not as good as they've been in the past, and that might be a bit of a concern against a team with high firepower and high octane offense like the Maple Leafs. But if you look at it in simple terms of the way they're built and the way they win games, the Toronto Maple Leafs are built to pile up points in the regular season, put on an entertaining product, score 70 goals or get close to it if you're Austin Matthews, like all that good stuff. They're not built for the playoffs. They never have been. They do not build. They invested in all of their like electric forwards and didn't invest enough in the goaltending and the defense. Whereas the Bruins are a little more well balanced as far as that goes. Maybe certainly don't have as much sheer talent up front as the Maple Leafs do. But I think they're a more well-rounded team, more designed to win in the regular season and the playoffs. And I just see this as a Bruins win, probably 5 or 6 games over the Maple Leafs in the first round.
The Bruins, Bertuzzi's been a better player for Toronto late in the season.
He has.
He was for most of the season.
That's true.
Domi, who beat the Bruins in Game 7 for Carolina in 22, is suddenly a relevant player in their lineup. Obviously, it's the defense and the goaltending that you look up as the check. If you're doing check, the Bruins get the check in the blue line. The Bruins get the check in the goal.
Big check in the goal. Yep.
Yeah, they get the big check in the goal. I mean, and who knows? Maybe if Swayman does start this series, then he gets inside their heads because of they know that every time they saw him this year, they couldn't do anything with him. Yep. So that might be a good ploy, good strategy to start out with trying to discourage them. Because all you need is one good game to start with, and then he's in their heads, and then there might not be any coming back from that. That said, I'm bothered by the Bruins' propensity for giving up a big goal after scoring a big goal.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was going to be a one season thing, but it's not. And as I've said before, and I've beaten this drum to death, but I'll be watching the Bruins on the left side of the ice on the puck retrievals, the soft dumps, when the forechecks come in and seeing, what's going on as far as them, getting it cleanly, moving it out, or are they going to become susceptible? And are they going to pressure Toronto's Ds? Because if Toronto has a weakness back there, I know that Liljegren's been playing up. Lyubushkin obviously acquired at the deadline, trying to put some glue and solidify that defense, and make it a little better than it's been. Then can they get to Morgan Riley? Can they make him cough it up? Can they put the body on him? I haven't seen enough of that this year to convince me the Bruins are going to do it in any kind of cumulative way over the course of a series. So I'm looking at that. The Bruins face-off game has been lousy all year. I'm looking at that. So, so there's a lot of little things there about the Bruins that I find that are things that are works in progress, that as this team goes forward in the next couple of years and retools itself and continues to buttress itself, like who's going to take those left shot D zone draws, and are they going to win enough of them when Toronto has all those good sticks that can turn those into goals. That stuff scares me a little bit. So yeah, I mean, is it a better matchup for them on paper? Yes, than it would have been against either one of the Florida teams, whom they would get the winner of in the second round if they win this thing. So, theoretically, I'm not, wrong about anything you've said. I just have a lot of doubt about what the Bruins are bringing to the table here, because I don't know if we're going to see the best version of themselves minus all the barnacles.
Yeah, and you're right, and that's a part of the equation. That's why I wouldn't have them when I talked about getting a month out of this team. That's why I would say something like that, because I saw
the playoffs are 2 months. So you win one series, you lose the next. You got
right,
a month.
Right. Like that. That's why I would say that, because I've seen this team over the course of the regular season, and there are some definite weaknesses on this team that can be exploited by a really good team, a really good coach. And they weren't completely addressed at the trade deadline, because they couldn't be completely addressed at the trade deadline because the Bruins, didn't have the cap space to really fix some of the problems that they had this year, or the, draft capital, the trade assets, whatever, in order to make moves to fix some of these things. And they're just, they're baked in the cake with the team, with the strengths they have and the things they do well. There are some things that other teams, like you said, the face-offs, the giving up goals in the third period and blowing leads in the third period, the way they played pretty consistently when the goalie was pulled for the other team, or when they pulled the goalie and tried to get an empty net goal. They've been dreadful in those situations all year when they've pulled the goalie and tried to score, almost without exception. They've been terrible. Their power play has really struggled down the stretch, though. The biggest bright spot from that game last night was the new look power play. Got a look in the third period finally. And wouldn't you know, Kevin Shattenkirk, shooting from the point, creates a rebound in front with a screen in front, and that pops out to Zacha and he scores. And how long, Mick, how many podcasts have we talked the power play? I said, put Shattenkirk on the top power play unit, take McAvoy off of there, put a guy that will shoot the puck, that sees the shooting lanes, that will create rebounds, that will be a threat up there, and it's going to open up stuff for everybody else there. And they've finally done it here, because I think the playoff desperation is there to do what's best for the team. And it creates a power play goal when they were 2 for 30 or something like that, going into that power play. So
let me back up 7 months. When they signed Shattenkirk, I told everybody that talked to me about it. They did this for the power play.
Yeah,
because they know they need a better power play, because they know they're not going to have the same run support 5-on-5. So they got to make sure they don't have an iffy power play. And I've been all year long, I'm waiting for Shattenkirk to be deployed here. And if it felt like, did I get this wrong? I mean, but here he is. So finally, the fact-finding mission is over. They need Shattenkirk on the power play.
Yeah, they need somebody. They need a defenseman that will shoot, basically. It's somebody that can find shooting lanes, shoot for rebounds, shoot intentionally wide off the end boards, like all of that stuff.
He knows how to get it through.
Will create that action around the net that will open up scoring chances for everybody else and open up things offensively. And you're seeing it happen. So that was the one thing that was good to see last night. And, the third period, they had Ottawa on the run. Ottawa could not get the puck out of their zone. They had them. If they could have. And I honestly thought Montgomery made a mistake pulling the goalie there when they had them 5-on-5. And they had them, already hemmed in down there. I think they probably would have scored if they didn't pull the goalie, based on the way the period was going. And instead, it turns into Pasternak throwing it in the middle of the ice, and it turned into an easy goal for Ottawa. But
maybe Monty was still in, like you said, looking past it to the playoffs and thinking,
well, maybe
here's an opportunity for me to get a drill.
Yes, 100%. And by the way, if we lose here, we play Toronto in the first round. I'm telling you, the conspiracy theory is out there, and I connect a lot of the dots
here too.
They're never going to admit it, but I really feel like the Bruins did not want to win those last 2 games, and there was a lot of evidence there that they made it look good and kept it close, playing good defense, playing hard, but offensively they did nothing in those 2 games until the third period against Ottawa.
We do have Factor Meals to help us out. America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit when it does get busy, when it does get crazy, when we do need a quick meal. They fuel you up fast with flavorful and nutritious, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. Takes less than 2 minutes to cook them. They're fresh, never frozen. Meals ready in 2 minutes, like I said. They have calorie-conscious options, going upscale with some of the things they're offering now, like surf and surf meal options, roasted garlic filet mignon, and shrimp and Cajun spiced shrimp and salmon, which is like right in my wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff I'm all about. So it's got everything for everybody. There's 34 plus chef prepared, dietitian approved weekly options for meals. You can get snacks, you can get breakfast items. Like it's a great deal. So if you want to get Factor meals, go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use the code Haggs50 to get 50% off of your first box. It's a great deal. I've tried it. It's fantastic. I recommend it to you. We love these ready to make meal kits, especially when we're on the go with our kids. So one more time, that's factormeals.com/Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. You won't be sorry if you go to Factor Meals. It gets the Haggs thumbs up seal of approval.
What's your biggest key as far as Toronto goes, Mick? What are you going to be watching with them? Because I think you're right on that guys like Bertuzzi and Domi, I think, are going to be factors. Much like last year, Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari, I thought, were two of Toronto's best players in the postseason when they, guys that they brought on as hired hands. Those are the kind of guys. It's that, to me, that's an indictment of the Stars on Toronto. When they bring in gritty veteran players like that, and they do more than like some of the big name guys in the playoffs, that speaks very loudly to me about, what they have, their best players, what they're capable of doing in the playoffs, as much as it speaks to the Ryan O'Reilly, Noel Acciari, Max Domi, like Tyler Bertuzzi. Those are playoff style players. But in addition to that, I think it's sometimes an indictment on those Maple Leafs star guys, the core four guys, the guys that are all making $10 million plus a year, that don't get it done in the playoffs. So like my key things to look at would be, a guy like guys like Austin Matthews. Really, he has to start having some superstar moments in the playoffs, much more than he's ever had before. And the goaltending for Toronto, I think that's a huge key. Like, is it going to be Wall? Is there anybody else? And how good is he going to be? And I think he's a St. Louis guy, isn't he? I think I remember Trent Frederick saying that those two played together when they were kids.
Really? I missed that.
Growing up in St. Louis. So that would be an interesting backstory as well. But what are you sort of keyed on, or what are you looking at as we build up to the playoff series?
Well, the elephant in the kitchen is Austin Matthews, and a guy with a stick that deadly, a guy who's so quick and so strong. And he's not as slow as I used to think he was. He skates better than I had given him credit for in my own mind, watching him over the years. The games I've seen this year, he moves better than I realized he does. Now, granted, with a 2-to-1 goal ratio, almost goals to assists, you'd think he was the winger on that line. So Toronto's got kind of a funny style there. So I was looking at their line chart on the daily, the daily line combinations? Okay.
Yeah.
So Matthews with Burt and Marner. So Marner's your line driving winger. Burt's your Hellraiser. And Matthews is your wizard stick. So I mean, if they don't mess around, then I think that a lot of it's going to be discouraging Marner on the zone entries, because I don't think they want to go to a dump and retrieval game. Bertuzzi's not fast on his feet, so he's not a good F1. He's more of a, you're already in the zone, and now I'm going to go to your net and cause problems. So I mean, Nylander's got blazing speed, but that's a different line. So, so I think the player the Bruins need to, they're going to worry about Matthews. Just don't go to sleep on him if you're caught in your zone and the Leafs are moving the puck around. But as far as going up and down the ice, I think the guy they need to kick the crap out of is Marner.
Yeah,
because he's the guy he's the little engine that could. He's sort of the Rick Middleton wearing 16, and he makes plays. He's a terrific player. So
And he's the only one of those star guys on the Leafs, the core four, that I would legitimately worry about, because I think he has what it takes externally and internally to get it done in the playoffs. I think he's a tough kid, in addition to being a very skilled kid, and he's kind of a winning type hockey player. If there's somebody I think you need to worry about in the series, it's absolutely Mitch Marner.
he's got more to prove too with his contract
Of course.
coming close.
Absolutely.
One more
And by
year,
the way,
maybe?
Joe Wall is from Dardenne Prairie, Missouri. I remember Freddy talking to me a few times about growing up playing with Wall and the Kachucks and like all the other, kids that
From
came
where
out.
in Missouri? So he's from the St. Louis area?
Yeah, Dardenne Prairie, Missouri. They all played together in the St. Louis area
Okay.
growing up,
Okay.
like tournament teams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. I will say this too, Mick. Like, people want to tweak the end of the regular season, play in games, like do all kinds of stuff to spice up the end of the regular season as far as qualifying for the playoffs. You see like Major League Baseball doing playoff games and some of these other leagues doing things to try to like tweak things or make it more interesting or give more teams a chance, whatever. The last few weeks of the regular season, especially in the East, definitely in the East, were awesome. The games mattered. The teams were playing each other. Like, we came down to a final day where Florida had to pull the goalie, even though the game was tied, because they needed a regulation win. And that turned into a goal, Washington scoring an empty net goal that won them a game and basically won them the playoff spot. Like, there were all these different combinations and all these different things happening where the Red Wings and the
Is that about the
Capitals
Flyers?
and the Flyers, they were all sort of like in it, and they were
Yeah, it
all,
was amazing how many moving parts there were for that playoff spot.
yes.
Amazing how many moving parts there were, and the layers of, if this happens, this team needs this scenario, this team needs that scenario. And I was in the crowd of people who were trying to figure this all out, and it's a lot of fun trying to figure, especially when it's not your team that you're
Well,
coming.
that had to be heartbreaking for the Red Wings to see Philly, see Torts pull his goalie, and basically give the game to Washington because
Yeah.
they needed the regulation win and give the playoff spot to the Capitals, who
Yeah,
clinched it as soon as they
and
scored the goal.
and here's the other thing: in Pittsburgh, you go 7-1-2 down the stretch, and you're out.
Yep.
They waited too long,
Yep.
so yeah, they finally got it going, but they were too little, too late for them. It just always seemed like it was going to be that way, and in the end, it was that way.
Well, that Bruins win against them was a killer.
Yes, it was. That was a big game for them.
That was a killer.
And the Bruins played their last good game of the year.
Yep.
So,
but that's what I mean. Like that those kind of games towards the end of the year, it showed me everything I needed to show.
I have one opinion about the potential expansion of the playoffs or the debate about whether to do it.
Yes.
I think the NHL had a situation since absorbing the 4 WHA teams in 1979, where you had 21 teams in the league and 16 made the playoffs. The regular season was a joke, but it didn't matter because the NHL was a ticket-based. It was not a TV league; it was a ticket league, and people went to the games because they wanted to go to the games. And the Islanders didn't turn it on in the early 80s until they needed to. So that's why they don't have too many great regular seasons like Montreal did in this decade before. But you have a situation there where one thing, as much as I hated the expansion and southern migration of the NHL throughout the 90s, the one byproduct of that, going from 21 teams to 30, made the regular season competitive because the tournament did not expand with the league. Suddenly, regular season hockey became pressure packed, and in all those new arenas, right in these big storage, these utility elevators, and with all the executives, you can feel the steam coming out of their ears after the games. You can feel the nervousness going into the games. And every regular season game means so much. The only thing you cannot bottle and put into the regular season is playoff emotion. That you cannot do. And that's what makes the playoffs so great and why watching this first round is going to be so incredibly fun. Just any game is a good game. You want to watch it. But if you try to add to the playoffs now, then all you're doing, in my opinion, is is taking away all that ground you work so hard as a league to gain to make your regular season relevant. You'll be sucking the relevance back out of it. And I think that'd be a huge mistake for the NHL.
I agree. Of all the 4 major pro sports leagues, they do it the best as far as down the stretch and the playoffs. And yes, people are going to bitch about the divisional setup and, having to play out of your division, that it's not advantageous for some teams. Like, Florida Panthers fans would, I'm sure, argue that they should be playing, one of the other, wild card team. They should be playing somebody.
Well, they should. They should.
know.
And the reason is because the regular season schedule was balanced. It's not like the 80s and 90s or early 90s when you played the Buffalo Sabres 8 or 9 times. You had them 4 home and 4 away. Montreal, can keep going down the line here. But those divisional rivalries, you could justify having a division-centric playoff. Now you have a division-centric playoff, but you have a balanced schedule because the league is so big now. They want to make sure that everybody gets to see Connor McDavid.
Right.
Now, I get the theory, but I would give up Connor McDavid to get back to the divisional rivalries. Not in that extreme. It doesn't have to be that, but give me 3 home and 3 away.
Yep.
And then rotate, what I get from the Western Conference during a year.
Yeah, and I think they will
give me some games against the Eastern Conference, other division, but
I
then,
agree.
And then rotate what I get home or away. Do I get a home game this year? No, I get there. They actually had that at one point where you didn't get a home game against a Western Conference team at one point. You got them on the road, but not at home. They actually did that at one point. But this mandate to get everybody, that assumes the player's going to show up, So I just think there's too much of those eggs into that basket for marketing purposes because they've got NBA jealousy. And I think that they are making a mistake here because it's ridiculous that you play Montreal. Oh, yeah, that's great. We got them Sunday and we got them Tuesday. Yeah, and then you don't see them again for 5 months.
I think that will have to change, especially as, the speculation is they're going to expand to like 36 in the next 5 years. There's going to be more teams coming into the league. So I think as that comes in, I think you're going to have to see that. And I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. It's like, you play one of the Western Conference divisions at home one year. You don't play them at home that year, and then you alternate or something, just so you add some divisional games. So you're playing your divisional opponents, to your point, 5 or 6 times a year instead of the 3 or 4 that we get now, which is not enough. Question of the week, Mick, and I think I answered this one.
But let me just, my bottom line on that whole thing is whatever your playoff format is should reflect the regular season schedule.
Absolutely.
And that's what's wrong right now. It's never been wrong before that I can think of, but it's wrong right now to have a division-centric playoff and a balanced schedule. Balance the playoffs if you're going to balance the schedule.
Yep. Question of the week. I believe I answered this when I did a solo mailbag episode last weekend, but I like the question, so I wanted you to get a crack at it. Hi, Joe. I have a mailbag question for you. In your latest podcast episode, you mentioned how well Paul Maurice coached the Panthers versus the Bruins in last year's playoffs. Aside from setting the line combinations and choosing a starting goalie for each game, in your opinion, makes a good in-game coach versus an average in-game coach? Is it as simple as keeping your players motivated throughout each game, or is there more to it than that? Thank you. Love the podcast, from Roger Perry. Mick, your thoughts?
Well, with the technology now, we get the video and the reporting back. I mean, I think that there are some coaches that look at their own team and say, we need to worry about our own game. And that's what they'll tell us. And then they'll go out and they'll do it, or maybe not. But other coaches are really good at finding the kryptonite on another team. And do I have that kryptonite in my lineup? And so Florida, like Maurice last year, devised a really good system, knowing that the Bruins played zone, that they don't go outside the dots with the Ds. They don't want to anyway, to eliminate plays once the puck's in their end. So what they did was they hard around it. They rimmed it hard around the bottom on the kick plate, so they go from point to point. They just fire it around, and the Bruins are caught going like this. And like, do I go outside our system? Do I break our system to cut this play off? Or do I, how do we get the puck back here? And I knew, and it happened, when the Bruins came out this year, because Monty's the coach, and they want to play that puck possession game, every team tried to parrot what the Panthers did last year because they showed them, here's how you play against the Bruins. So Monty had to do some in-game adjustments to figure out how do we get the puck back and tweak our system so that we can interrupt some of these plays, recover the puck, and start moving in on the way we want to. And I thought that he did a really great job of that, adjusting the Bruins system to that, and having, you know, some tweaks so that guys could make plays without violating the whole system or throwing it out of kilter. And I thought that was really good. And that's one of the things when I'm watching the Bruins that I'm going to be really keying on in the playoffs here. I don't know that Toronto is going to be focused on what the Bruins do and trying to screw that up like Florida did last year, as much as trying to just impose themselves because they're a skilled team. So I think that may bode well for the Bruins that they're going to try to play according to their skill. But like the scary team that scares me in the West this year is Edmonton, because a lot of teams decided, don't let McDavid be the guy who beats us. Well, he's beating you with assists, not goals. Yeah. Yep. So to me, the fact that he's taken another step in his career to reinvent himself according to the needs of the game and what's presented to them as a team is a great sign for the Edmonton Oilers that they're ready to take another step. It's a little like the Dallas Stars turning Mike Modano into a shadow for Peter Forsberg, and check that guy. Here's the guy who scored almost more goals than any American ever to play the game, and he's getting his job in those playoffs was to eliminate another player on the other team. I mean, this is what Bobby Carpenter did when the Bruins got him and turned him into a checking player, and then he wound up being really ready for Lou Lamoriello to deploy him in the '95 playoffs for the Devils. So I think that great players, great goal scorers, they take steps in their career to evolve, to change, and so it's on them too to if the coach has the wherewithal to figure these things out. And so having that acumen, that's a great thing to have. As a coach in the playoff series, because you're going to play the same team. And over 4 games, you get it all figured out. When you get to that 5th game, it's just who's doing what they do better.
Yep. And it'll be interesting. Like there are so many moving parts to a Toronto series beyond what's going on the ice, when it's the Toronto media getting involved, stressing on things, and Mike Babcock, I remember him getting Patrice Bergeron kicked out of the face-off circle all those times when they played in the playoffs. Like right, the little thing,
but with public comment.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's what I mean, though.
Crazy, yeah.
But that's what I mean, though. That's the Toronto has a unique thing going on where they have a megaphone. The Leafs do, the players and the coach. The media like parrots it and then throws it out there. And because it's such a Toronto-centric league, the league is paying attention to all that stuff as well. And that turns its own thing. And I know the players are hyper aware of that. And especially Marchand's been one that like he plays with the Toronto media because he knows that, that they have a megaphone and they use it a lot, especially when the playoffs start. And it turns into that sort of fun game within the game thing that's going on. So that's
99. This is, I can't believe this is 25 years ago now, but the late great Pat Burns, he went to the media to say that Buffalo is getting away with murder. And right. I mean murder. That's a quote. And he was talking about, when Michael Pekka forechecking on Ray Bourque, one of the ways he forechecked was to punch him in the face. It literally did it right under us. And I'm thinking, like, how the hell did they not see that? How is he not going off for roughing here? And the Bruins are just trying to let's play our game. But Burns knew what was going on. They knew they were going to lose that series, so, they got it to 6. Good for them.
All right. Mick, thank you very much. Let's also thank our sponsor, Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Prize Picks offers injury insurance, so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, Prize Picks will have your back and not count that as a loss. That sounds pretty cool to me. You can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey entries, and baseball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. You just basically pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and pretty simple. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Mick, thank you very much for coming on. Let's bring on the playoffs.
Hats off to Jack Edwards.
You know what? Absolutely. And we're going to get into that the next time you and I are talking, because we've got a whole playoff to enjoy him coming up and give him his flowers. But for now, we're going to take off. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you at the rink.